Hi everyone, my name is Andy Evansen. Are you ready to explore the fascinating world of watercolor? In this lesson, we're getting awfully close to the most interesting part, so I recommend you just sit tight and pay attention closely for the next half hour. I'm going to get some yellow ochre or raw sienna on my brush. Don't make it too yellow, okay? I'm thinning it out some. These are light colors, remember, but just at the top of that waterfall, we've got a little bit of that warmer color coming down. I think I'm going to add just a little bit of lavender to it as it works its way down. We talked about that yesterday, lavender being a kind of a nice color to take the edge off of a yellow without it turning too green, like the blues would do to it. Okay. And I didn't wet this area down here. So I've got the color of the water in there, maybe even just a little more kind of a violet-y color. I'm going to mix some rose and cobalt blue. We're down at the bottom of that waterfall. Turn it a little bit more purple down here and up here. Okay. So I've got all that water rushing down to that lower area where it can be more white and foamy. So the color of my water is in there. Again, kind of yellow ochre, raw sienna, mixed a little lavender in it, and then I mixed some cobalt blue with rose or crimson and got some violets down below here. So that's filled in. All I'm doing is making sure that my white areas are going to have some color on them on here unless I want them white. Okay, and the only areas I wanted white was pretty much just down in the lower end here. So now I'm going to take that same little bit of color that I mixed and just cover the lower end of that reflection down below here in the water, the reflection of the waterfall. Got some of that warmth in it, and I'm just going to get this area covered in. Wanted a bit more of the yellow warm in there. Okay, so this is a little bit darker than that strip along the base. And remember, we're going to be painting over the rocks later. Don't worry about painting around all your rocks. Paint around things that are going to be white or lighter later on. So I've got the color for my reflection. It's a little bit darker than the waterfall itself. No whites down there really. So that's filled in. That's filled in. Now I've got my sky and a lot of the pinks and stuff for the tops of the rocks. That's pretty much all the rest of what we need to do to fill in here for our light areas. Maybe change the color just a little bit down below. I'm going to take a little bit bigger brush now, kind of that squirrel mop, and I'm going to start mixing in some burnt sienna, some rose, permanent rose or alizarin crimson, a little bit of cerulean blue, and I'm going to start getting in the tops of these rocks with some of that pink color. A little bit stronger with the pink. Keep it nice and fluid, have some fun with it, okay? Make it, the fun part of watercolor is so in addition to actually painting, I love teaching painting. I started during the pandemic teaching online courses, and it allowed me to reach a much wider audience, which was very exciting for me, being able to share my knowledge with a wider group of people. And it's also more convenient for the students as well. They don't have all the travel expenses. You can just stay in your own home and study right there on your computer. So if you haven't studied with me yet, or if you feel like you want to continue learning, I'm sharing my favorite free workshop with you now. So you can sign up via the link on this video and get a taste for how I teach, and hopefully you find it interesting enough to continue on. Just letting all these colors mix and merge on the paper. Remember, we're going to be going over the water later with a deeper value, so don't worry about that. I want that color coming out onto the top of this rock. Maybe switch to a little bit more violet in a couple of areas. I don't want to use paint the whole thing the same color here. Maybe have an area with a little more blue in it. Changing it up a little bit. This is still light, okay? But not all lights are created equal. The tops of these rocks aren't as bright white as the waterfall, all right? And this is gonna fade as it dries. There's a lot of water in my puddles, my paper was wet. It's got a lot of drying to do, and as watercolor dries, it fades and lightens. So I'm pushing the values and the colors a little bit as I'm painting these light tones, making sure they're still gonna have some really beautiful color on them after they're dry. And again, it's nice to have that little bit of variety. Like I said, sometimes it's a little bit more blue, sometimes it's a little bit more pink, the tops of your rocks. Just keep rinsing that brush off, going back to your palette and changing the color on your brush. Nice and pretty. There's a little bit more of that coming up here. Some of these other rocks up above. And then maybe I'll just go a little bit more blue. Even though we're going to be covering most of that water up later on, if I have a couple little strips left behind, some highlights in that water, I might want them to be reflecting that pale blue sky in a couple of these little areas like down around here. Okay, so I'm going to finish off this wash by going a little bit more blue with things. Don't want to leave too many whites there. And then I'll just make sure that I'm leaving more white up at the top here where that foam is coming in from the watercolor, or the watercolor, the waterfall. Everything's nice and soft and fuzzing, no details yet, okay? The details will come later on with the middle value wash. Just covering everything up. Alrighty, I'm gonna go ahead and do the sky, I guess. Right now, I'm gonna mix some cobalt blue and lavender together, maybe just a little bit of cerulean blue also. Yeah, it's not a straight up blue. I want to tone it down. If you don't have lavender, you can just mix a little rose or crimson in with it. But it looks a little bit kind of a blue, light pale blue violet on that sky. Nice big puddle. I'm gonna get this sky in with a big brush. Remember, it's gonna fade a little bit, so I'm going a little bit stronger than I need to. Watercolor usually dries about a value or two lighter than what you put it on. I'm gonna care, your trees are gonna be darker. Don't paint around your trees. Paint right through them. Bring this right down to the top of my waterfall here. Okay, so my sky is in. And the last thing I'm gonna do is just kind of continue this down. If I do end up leaving a couple little gaps in here, I might want some of the, like the brighter ochres here and some of this other pale stuff in the rocks. So I'm just gonna use up what's on my palette here with these browns, maybe add a little bit more brown and ochre to it, and just finish up this hillside with a little bit of these tones. But again, look how much of this is going to get covered up later. All right, so I'm just putting down some color here. So if I leave a gap or two later on, I'm not going to have white paper. I'll have a pale color of the rocks and bluffs on there. That's all this wash is for. Again, let that carry down right through here too. Just starting to establish all those colors. right down to where I didn't wet the paper. Maybe a little bit more purple down there. Okay. That's my light wash. A lot of times people are shocked when they hear that because they see that amount of color and value on there. But remember, it's gonna brighten up as it dries. It's gonna fade. I'm taking a synthetic brush and I'm already starting to kind of soften the edge of that water. We'll have to do it again when we put the middle values on. But I'm just trying to get a little bit of softness and freshness to the edge of this here. So that is getting rid of the whites on the paper. This is filled in with the pale violety blue sky. This is filled in the top of it with the warmer kind of a ochreish color going down into some of the adding some lavender and violets and stuff into the lower part of the waterfall, then leaving it more white at the base. This is filled in. The reflection of the waterfall, just trying to keep it a nice little same colors that I used above, just dropping them below there. All these whites are filled in with this pale pinks and violets and browns and stuff that are going to be the tops of the rocks later. Okay, that's all this wash is for, filling in your whites. I know it was hard enough on the value study, keeping up with how you have to reload your brush and all the little shapes that you have to paint around. But again, by painting my value studies, I've done it once, I've warmed up, maybe I do something that I didn't like and I made a mistake and I'll have to remind myself not to do that when I go to my color version. But now I want to paint that same shape on here, only now I'm going to use some kind of darker blue greens, some deeper violets, even darker still, kind of a violety brown for the rock here, going a little bit lighter with the middle value and cooler for these trees in the background, warming them up quite a bit with some of the ochres and brighter greens. These trees are brighter and more green than these are. They're closer to us. We want to start creating some of that atmosphere. Then coming down the shadow sides of these rocks with some more of that kind of a violety brown, and into the reflections and into the shadows. So painting the same thing. And again, don't worry if you can keep up or not. That's not the point of this, is just to kind of show you my process and how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and remix some puddles here. Like I said, I want a couple of different types of greens. Some of them are going to be a little bit cooler. So I'm going to mix some Payne's gray, cobalt blue, cerulean blue with some raw sienna to get a little bit of those, the nicer bluer greens from the background there. And I'm gonna get some violets and browns and stuff for the rocks coming down in again. So I'm mixing some lavender and some blue and some rose and some burnt sienna, just getting some of the rock colors coming down into that foreground bluff. I'm not interested in getting as many different little color variations and everything in there. I'll flatten that out a little bit. That brighter green that's in there. I'm not going to worry too much about that. I might get a little bit of it in there when I'm painting this, but get some brighter ochres and golds for when I need that over on the other side as well. We're going to start working into that side of the waterfall with a deeper color. So I'm mixing some neutral tint and some burnt sienna for there. So again, I can't mix everything I need for this. My palette isn't big enough. That's a big shape, but just getting your palette, started off with some of these nice big washes and puddles of color is going to be important for this, so that you can just kind of keep cleaning your brush and reloading. And now I'm at that point where I can just kind of keep adding color as I go. And I feel I need to these things. Sometimes I'm just going to start mixing them together as I paint to make the colors more natural. So again, you've got to work kind of fast, and that's where practicing all those basics of the washes comes into play. Nobody starts painting and starts painting loosely right away. Okay, most of us, when we start, because you're learning all the tricks of the trade, you just paint slower. There's too many things to think about. But once you get a comfort level and you've painted more and you learn more, a lot of these technical kind of things that I talk about as far as, you know, the values, the puddles, reloading your brush, but they've just become automatic, and then you can paint a little faster and more comfortable. So I know it's overwhelming right now. Watercolor is not an easy medium by any stretch of the imagination, even for experienced painters, oil painters and stuff. They comment about how difficult watercolor is because it's so dependent on you know, timing and consistency, and so many things can go wrong in the middle of the painting. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to start the same place I did on my value study, the edge over here. And I'm not going to get the greens on my brush and jump around and paint all the green trees. Okay, I'm going to treat it the same way as I did in the value study. Just keep changing the color on my brush and work my way left to right. Quickly soften a little bit of this, come back, work my way down here into the water, the shadow sides of the rocks and the water, and try and keep it, again, nice and fresh and bold. I want to try and mirror the effect that I managed to get in the value study. Don't worry about how accurate it is, even though we're painting from a photograph. All righty. So again, I'm going to start with these trees up at the top of this cliff. Same kind of an approach that I did before, painting with the side of my brush for the bigger, fatter areas, then using the tip of my brush at the tops of them to break them up a little bit to make them look like tops of some evergreens. Might want to drop a little bit of a warmer color in here and there for a little bit of variety at the tops of them. There's some yellow trees over here, aspens or something that I can drop in. It's not all just one color of green. Keep my brush flowing right down to the bottom here. Get the top of this little evergreen painted a little bit better. Okay, nice tall vertical shapes there. Same approach that I did on the value study. Now again, the tricky part when I come down here, I'm just going to simplify the side of this bluff. There are too many little weird colors, shifts and things in there. And I don't want it to become about the side of that bluff, my painting. So I'm going to flatten this out quite a bit with some of that violet-y color. I can maybe leave a couple quick little dry brush, lighter areas from my first light wash behind if I want to, but overall, I just want to flatten that out a little bit more than what the reference photo has. There's too much going on in there, and I don't want it to be that busy. So I'm making it a bit more simplified. I'm just changing to more of a violet-y color, like I said, down below there. Up to the top of the rocks and the waterfall over here. Carry this down to the edge of the water. I'm going to go a bit deeper with that right here, a bit stronger. I'm painting this little area down here, that edge of the rock. So I've added some of that neutral tint and browns to this here for where it hits the rock of the side of the bluff. Back to some of this lavender color for down below here. And again, I just left a few little brighter areas from that first wash behind. Okay, so now real quickly, one more time, I'm going to take that synthetic brush, get it wet, dry it up, get some of that water off of the paper towel, and soften that edge and kind of merge it into my waterfall to make it look like it's spraying a little bit softer there, not quite so hard edged. That should be good. Good enough. I just didn't want it too hard edged is all. All right, back up to the top of there. My trees in the distance. Back to that green. Add a few more trees up above here. Got that nice tall one here. You notice I've got that paper towel in my hand. Anytime I feel like I've got too much water on here, I just quickly take some of it off on that paper towel, trying to control the consistency on my paper. Okay, now I'm back to that little area above the waterfall where I want those trees even further back to be even a little bit lighter and cooler maybe. So I'm going to lighten my brush off, add a little bit more blue to this. And I'm going to paint these distant trees a little bit more pale and bluer, so it looks like they're through some of that misty fog or whatever that we got going on there. up above those rocks again, just kind of finish that area off. I like to take my fingers sometimes and just kind of soften an edge if it feels too harsh too. Create the top of the water there, painting around that. Almost some dry brush in that background area. Keep that nice and soft and light. Okay, so I'm following that same approach, same shape. Now I need to go back to that deeper brown that's coming down in that rock in the middle of the waterfall. Grab that color, paint that in. Create that edge. And again, it's a little bit harder edged up at the top there. And then as it comes down, I'm gonna add some more blue to it as it's working its way down here. And then doing the same thing, I'm gonna take synthetic brush, get it damp, wipe it off, soften those edges and just kind of merge it in with the spray of the lower part of the waterfall here. That kind of merge into a couple of these other areas where you're seeing the rock through the foam also. Alrighty, back over to here, continuing on my shape. Got more rock on the other side there. And down like so. That area of the waterfall is maybe a little bit stronger or wider than the left side. Don't make them equal. This is a little thinner, this is wider. Variety is important. Get a few of those little marks in one more time, wet that little brush, kind of soften that edge a bit, bring some of that tone in. So it looks like a waterfall. Okay, just controlling those edges. Just practice is all. And that goes back to that module 2, broad types of brush strokes and soften, working wet into wet. Okay, so I've got this whole part. Now I'm coming into this area, connecting that. So now I'm going to go stronger with those greens, a little more yellow. I'm going to connect that side and go a little bit stronger with the middle value, like I said, making sure that those trees look closer, more vibrant, more warm. That's going to come down on this hillside, painting this shape now. These evergreens leaning in. Break up the top of them. Just using the stuff that's on my palette, all those greens, neutralize them out. Get that tree trunk of that tall one going right up and off the page here. I can always come back in and add some foliage to that more. I want to don't sacrifice losing that nice big edge by messing around up there for 10 minutes painting little brush strokes. Okay, I want to keep moving and make sure I've got that nice fluid edge on my brush. So I can always come back in, like I said, up above and start adding some more color up there. Okay, now the greens are done. Now I'm gonna switch into the color of the rock. Rinse my brush off. Remix some of the colors of the rocks. That's what I was saying at the beginning. You can't mix everything you need, but at least I've got some of those colors out on my palette now. So I can just kind of keep adjusting as I go. Mixing some cerulean and rose and cobalt blue and burnt sienna, just like I did for the lower part down there. There's actually some of that ochre in there too, up above. And again, every once in a while, maybe leaving a little bit of a highlight from that first wash, but it's mostly when I get down here, when those rocks start flattening out and those light surfaces of the rocks facing the sky, that I want to keep a little bit brighter. Okay, now I'm going to go a little bit stronger with that violet as I come down to that little edge here. This rocky area. And now I'm gonna have to practice again, trying to get some of those lighter surfaces, painting around them, leaving the tops of these rocks facing the sun a bit brighter. I wanted that green to be a little stronger, that little shrub. I missed that shrub. More greens here. I'm gonna zoom in on that real quick, just so, again, the point of this is to paint nice, big, fluid connected shape, and then look at all those wonderful color transitions in that middle value shape. Okay, that's what makes a watercolor look like a watercolor. That's the end game for this, finding those big connected shapes, not just jumping around and painting little things with little brushes. Connect, connect. Got that green all over. I'm gonna clean this off a little bit. All right, now I'm down to the shadow sides of these rocks again. So I'm mixing some violets and blues and browns. And just like we did on the value study, don't overthink it. Don't try and make it 1,000 times better just because you're going to the color version here, okay? Try and keep it nice and fresh and bold. If it was reading well enough on the value study, don't reinvent the wheel. Keep it nice and loose and painterly. Just a few of those horizontal shapes. Down to the water line here. Okay, we've got some nice tops. Look how light that first wash. Remember, I was like, boy, that's strong color, right? Now that we've got the middle values on and that's had a chance to really dry and fade, you can see how much stronger you have to go with your light washes sometimes to truly get what you want. Okay, now I need the reflection of that color down below. Just kind of keep remixing that on my palette here. Basically mixing cobalt blue and rose and some burnt sienna and raw sienna together to get that warmer colors of the rocks here. And now I'm going to paint that reflection, maybe leaving behind a couple of the top surfaces of a few more rocks. A little greener. Still have too much purple in there. I wanted that to be a little greener. There we go. It's reflecting a lot of those evergreens and stuff from above. Okay, so now I'm down here in this area, painting this shape, and that's going to come right down and define the top of my rock there, just like I did before. Right down to this rock. Paint around the light top surface of that rock. Coming over here, painting around the lights of another rock or two off to the side. In fact, my light wash probably dried too light. And some of that might be because I sped it up with the hair dryer, by the way. It's always a good idea to just let your washes dry naturally. Okay, same shape. Follow your plan. I'm just changing the color of my brush once in a while is all. Now I'm going to come in into the shadow side of those rocks in front of it. So I'm going to go back to the more violety color, touch that bead, and start creating this shadow area of this big craggly rock. And some dry brush, paint that down to the top of the rock below it. And create that highlight. Again, these are kind of jagged edged rocks here. Same shape, right? Coming down back to that greenish water. Down here again, in between some of the rocks over on the other side. Painting around the top of this rock now with my greenish water. Leave that behind. Paint around the top of a rock over there on the edge. Back to the shadow colors of the rock. Connect that in. Just leaving the top surface of that rock behind. keep changing that color on your brush is all. So fun to paint this way. It looks like a watercolor, not stressing all the little details. Remember what I was saying before? Once you get to the boundaries of your painting, you can just start making little shapes. You don't want to suck the viewer's eye down with too much visual interest and information down in the corners of your painting or the edges. So I'm just going to simplify these shapes even more once I get down to some of those areas. But just creating the lights on the tops of the rocks by painting the shadow areas and the water above them and around them. More down here, another small little rock. This is going to come over and connect with the shadow of this big rock here. A bit more like so. Can always come in and do some little dry brush texture on the top surfaces of those rocks, you know, later. I'm not worried about that for now. This is more about capturing the big stuff. Another highlight on the top of a little rock there. Create the highlight on the top of that little rock there. Paint the shadow of that big rock here. Do some dry brush on there and start giving it some texture and form. I just wipe that brush off and doing some dry brushing there. Back to some of the greens. Now we're back to some water down in that corner. Just changing that color a little bit to have the variety between rock and water. Couple more little highlights there, here and there. Coming right into that big guy. Adding some warm color again. I want some burnt sienna on there, actually not raw sienna. There we go. Okay. Rock. Just colors and shapes, that's all. Have some fun with it. Leaving the top surface of that rock behind, leaving a little bit of that one behind. Okay, now we're going to get up to that water again. And that's going to be back to that kind of a greenish blue that's reflecting the trees and stuff. So that yellow ochre or raw sienna and some cerulean blue to make kind of a dullish green color for that water. Paint around, whoops, it's a little too dark. Paint around the top of that little rock there. I'm gonna have to be careful and paint around the tops of a couple of smaller rocks out here on the fringes, but that's connecting right over this guy. Another little rock there. And now as I go up, I'm gonna start doing those horizontal strokes. Exact same process that I did on here, only instead of just dipping my brush into one big puddle of Payne's gray, I have to keep changing the color on my brush, but I'm painting that same big connected middle value shape. Right into that green of the water here. Like I said, now it's more horizontal brush strokes to get the lay it, flatten the water out. Keep it nice and simple. I'm going to start dragging it in towards the reflection of the waterfall, breaking it up, leaving little sparkles behind from that first wash. I do those quick horizontal brush strokes like this. That helps to get that effect. A little bit more, a little violety color in there. That's kind of reflecting that deeper rock from up above on the waterfall. So changing the color to a little bit more of that violety blue here. And it's dark enough so it's helping to pop the spray, that light water at the base of the waterfall. Start to drag that in a little bit. Dry brush strokes. This will be covered, practiced in the early modules too, and the types of brush strokes. Dry brush. Most paintings have a little combination of several different types wet into wet, dry brush, wet on dry paper, okay? It's not all just one catch-all approach that fits everything. You've got to try and use some of these tools to get the effect that you need. All right, same shape. Look at how similar these two shapes are. But to think that I would just dive in and paint this way, that big connected shape without working through some of those problems in my mind's eye first, that's pretty foolhardy. You've got to, watercolor requires a plan. I'm gonna, before this is too dry, I'm gonna take that synthetic brush, I'm gonna rinse it off. Once again, just kind of dry it off on my paper towel. And I want to, there's some of these brighter rocks here are creating a little bit of a reflection down here. I'm just going to try and pull some of that paint off and lighten that off a little bit here. In a couple of spots, let those reflections come down into that area. Soften those in. Make it look wet. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back to the color or the value study. Find some of those all important darks. Make sure I'm not gonna get too carried away with them. When you put the darks on, they start to create distance and the illusion of depth, okay? So be careful that you don't put too many darks into the background of your painting. I wanna bring those foreground rocks visually forward in the viewer's mind's eye. I can darken up a few things. I already have a little bit of that in the middle value because I changed it. But primarily what I need to do here is bring those boulders in the foreground, add some darks there and make sure that they're visually coming forward. So I'm going to add some of these deeper shadows down here. Deepen the shadow on that guy. Maybe darken the water a little bit as it's reflecting some of those rocks too. The stronger, deeper rocks. Darken the reflection on this one and the shadow on it a little bit more. Darken that one, shadow side. A couple of these out here, give a little bit of a darker shadow on. Darken the shadow down on this big rock up above here, really pop that out from the reflection of the waterfall. I'm leaving some of the middle value shadow behind. That's why I painted the shadows once in middle value, because I'm not covering all of it up. Now I'm leaving some little gaps behind here and there. So I don't have white paper. I have the combination of middle value and dark in some of these little shadowy areas. But look what that does. As soon as I add the dark contrast, this was all one big connected shape. Now visually, those come forward in the viewer's mind, okay? There's a time and a place for all this. And most of us, we start to freak out a little bit if our painting isn't looking right at these earlier stages. Be patient. Just trust how much happens at the end when you put those details in. And a lot of times that's one of the problems with the figure module, because we're worried that our people don't look like people right away. So we just stress about them in the early stages of the painting, when really towards the end, when you start putting some of these darks in and darkening up their pants and their hair and hats and things, all of a sudden they start to look more and more like people. But we're in a rush to get to that stage. So we start sweating it in the earlier stages when we should be just connecting them and integrating them into the painting and their surroundings. Just bringing that shoreline forward a little bit too. And then very subtly, hopefully lightly here, a couple areas on here too. And just a little bit more on that rock around the waterfall. But not too much. not as dark as what I had down in the foreground with those rocks. Okay, so that doesn't take that much, and that's already pretty doggone convincing on that scene to finish things off with those darks. Do the same thing now on my color version, even if it's a little bit damp, still, that's all right. I'm not too worried about it. I might start with some of those darker areas on the waterfall itself so that if they fuzz a little bit, I'm okay with it. Making sure everything isn't green. I'm just mixing a slightly darker violety color with some French ultramarine and alizarin crimson and burnt sienna. I just want to go a little bit darker back here while things are still damp on a bit of these rocks. And again, I just take my finger once in a while and soften an edge if I feel like it's too harsh. But I want the edge of that waterfall to pop just a little bit more from the trees beyond it. Okay, same thing I did here. Now I need to darken this guy up in that foreground and that little corner, visually really make that pop from the waterfall. And a little bit stronger with that green right at the top of it. This little green shrub here. And then darken up the shadow color below it. Back to those violets and browns for the shadow colors on the rocks. There we go. Just kind of bring that rock visually forward a bit more. Flatten some of those shapes out. Just a few more little shadows here. Again, what does that contrast do? Brings those shapes forward in the viewer's mind. Okay, so the same thing that I just did on the little value study version, I put it on my color one. That little area down here, these rocky shadows. Changing the direction of my brush strokes once in a while, flatten things out. All right, so that pops that out and sets the waterfall back a little bit. Maybe just a little bit of a shadow under the evergreen tree up at the top there. Adding some form up here. And on this little shrub too. Yeah, not too much. All right, now we're down to the big boulders. No green left to do, so now I'm going to be mixing some of that nice neutral tint, burnt sienna, some ultramarine and alizarin crimson to get a little bit of violety too. And let's start getting some of these now that it's had a chance to dry. But I started up above because I didn't want to make these look soft at all. I want these to be nice and hard edged, so I'm just letting that dry a little bit more while I was working on those things up above. Bring those rocks forward for the viewer. Going even darker still. Changing the direction of my brush stroke. Got a little thicker paint on here, so it's kind of a dry brush once in a while too, to to make it look like texture. I'm really trying to bring those boulders forward, getting nice and dark. Some of these shadows. Darken up that little corner again. Down here, a bit more dry brush strokes on these rocks. A little bit of lavender on that one. You can see, I mean, I just keep changing that direction of my brush strokes. That rock is more flat, that one is more vertical, you know, whatever it might be. Darken up the shadow of this one up above here now too. Create some distance from the reflection of the waterfall and pop out the light on the boulder below it. That form on here. Okay, I think you can see right now, if I start going in here and adding detail on all these evergreens and darks all over the place, it all kind of becomes confusing. I want to get that misty feel of the spray of the waterfall, adding some haze in the air. So I'm trying to keep as much as I can, keep the detail off of things that are back there beyond the waterfall, and keep the contrast up here in the foreground and a little bit around the waterfall area itself. Shadow of that rock was a little bit warmer. Changing the colors a bit. You can go a little bit warmer with the water down here, it looks like. Just a little deeper, that water down here in the foreground, because it's reflecting a lot of the darker rocks above. Darken that up one more time. And again, Hannah talked about that from the beginning, about trying to keep your paintings looking fresh and clean. The fewer times you have to go over things to get the color and value you want, the cleaner your paintings are going to be. So just learning to judge these values, plan ahead, painting confidently and quickly makes a big difference. If you're unsure and you find yourself fiddling around your paintings too much, that's when things start to get muddy. All right, a little bit on the water here just to add some distance in the water itself also, and it'll be pretty much wrapped up. Following the, it needs some little things here and there, but it's important to get, I like to get my paintings looking like they're about 90% done, and then step away from them and judge it, come back and look at it with a fresh eye later, see if it needs anything else. Sometimes it looks done when I step away from it, but too often, if you just keep painting on it, when you're in one go, you find yourself doing things that aren't necessary. That's important to keep it nice and fresh and lively. So I'll hand it back over to you, Hannah. So I hope this video was helpful for you. If you found it helpful, please subscribe to our YouTube channel using the link in the video here, and continue immersing yourself in the wonderful world of art. In addition to myself, there are many talented instructors on the YouTube channel here through Artefacto. So I hope you enjoy.